and welcome to our Wellness Summit session, Getting Unstuck in Times of Change. I'm Morgan Germack, and I'm your moderator for this session. I'm a social worker and the Clinical Operations Manager at Jewish Family Services. And I'm so thrilled to be here today. In 2018, Jewish Family Services and the JCC came together to help create conversations about mental health and wellness in our community, leading to our first annual Wellness Summit. Our mental health is vital to our overall health and well-being, which is why it's so important that we work together to create a community of hope, empathy, empowerment, and inclusion, and cultivate resilience in our lives, which is why today we continue this conversation. Please feel free to ask questions during this session. You can click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. I'll ask your questions at the end of the presentation. And if we can't get to all of your questions, we'll post the answers after the session. Today, we are joined by Mariann Wolskee. Mariann is a licensed clinical social worker at Jewish Family Services and an adjunct professor in the Master in Mental Health program at Springfield College. Mariann specializes in trauma, relationship counseling, grief and loss, and health recovery. Additionally, she has experience as a program director, a corporate trainer, a community educator, and she's certified in expressive movement therapy and yoga. Please welcome Mariann Wolskee.
Well, thank you, Morgan. Let me see, get to the bottom of here and share the screen so we can get started. Thank you to Morgan, and also thank you for those of you who have chosen to attend this session. I'm looking forward to this, bringing this up for you. Again, Morgan shared the title of it, and I'd like to share the title again and offer you the reasons why. I use this Getting Unstuck in Times of Change because I'm going to process the platform through the stages of grief and loss, and we'll explain that a little bit deeper. One of the strongest messages I believe as a JFS employee and devotee to the services that we provide to the community is that JFS wants all of us not to feel alone in this. This pandemic that has created strong links for many, many people to isolation and loneliness, and the impact of that is what we're going to talk about today, about how we can move through. Whoops. It's not shifting. Oh, there we are, hitting wrong. We can just breeze past this. That's just me and what I do for a living. I thought a good way to talk about this, the impact of COVID in times of change, is to just take a look at the timeline. You know, in March of 2020, which feels like 7 years ago instead of 7 months ago to me. We have traveled through many emotional ups and downs with a lot of unknown factors and other extremely pressured environmental issues going on in the world. So we're going to work through this timeline beginning at March. And I remember March 14th making the decision to drive up from the beach to go home because there were these notifications that we were going to need to be locked in and locked down for the next 2 weeks. The next stage that I want to get to, because from March to October, we worked through many stages of grief and loss, and I'll talk about them on the next slide. And the third framework that I want us to focus on is that what do we do as we move forward? Where are we now? What can we learn together? And how do we move forward into hope? Hopelessness is one of the biggest indicators of someone struggling through depression. I took this image from a friend of mine's Facebook, and I do not have a citation to offer you other than my friend who shared this. But I think this image is a kind of a good way for us to take a peek at what has happened to us. Physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. You know, the young lady holding the vase is holding on to life. We're moving through life on a day-to-day basis, taking care of our children, taking care of our families, taking care of our friends. We were moving out into the communities. We were volunteers. We were workers. We were moving through life. And with one quick announcement that all things must come to a halt. That second picture depicted for me what it felt like. I was not able to go out into the world and go to my office and see my colleagues and friends and coworkers at JFS. I was not able to see my children, my grandchildren. And I thought, it's just for 2 weeks. The 2 weeks, again, extended to a month. And then we got into June and month, and we started picking the pieces together because we were no longer told you cannot go out at all. We were starting to tell, if you do safe social distancing, wash your hands and keep safe distancing from one another, stay away from large crowds and all that. We had to start then take the responsibility of what's right. My experience with working with older adults is that made it harder for them to make choices. It was almost easier when they didn't have to make the choice. Now they have to make a choice, and is it really safe? So as we move through this, what I like to take us through, identifying grief and loss, and what I want to move through, what I'm hopeful for as we end October and come into the end of the year, and all the hopes that people have for the new year, that we can start to see the opportunities that have come to us through grief and the growth and change. Many of the folks that I work with share the things that have happened and that they've been able to turn creatively into a very, at least a satisfying connection. So I want to hopefully my intention today is moving from panic, actually have some people feeling that panic and find ways to get peace daily inside yourself, practices that I use in my life, that I offer in my practice. And I keep coming back to this term, learning to get upset, because as the next few frames will tell you, when we get to a stage in grief, which is the response from loss, and we stay stuck in that, that's when we have effects mentally, emotionally, physically. The proof is out there. And I do want to share my perspective and the work that I do in exploring the gifts of awareness from our nervous system. Our nervous system is just a gift that if we pay attention to, kind of get out of our heads, drop down into our body, and trust the gifts that it brings. So I want to understand, just to summarize, I'm going to share a few slides, not read everything, but share a few slides of what helped grounded me to see what I would share today. Some of the research that's happened, understand the impact on the body, mind, and spirit, and then explore some opportunities for how we can move through this grief and loss to growth and change, so that we understand that depression that comes from loneliness and can come from anxiety mixed. It's real. We can name it, we can own it, and we connect it and meet that unknown factor. The favorite question for me and a lot of the anxiety from my friends and clients that I work with is, when will this end, that anxiety? That we can meet that in the middle without not trying to stuff it, but meet it in the middle and create that same energy to work towards growth, to have an intention to lift our spirits, to do the things, then take the actions in a mindful way on a daily basis that will affect your mind and mood. I believe this is just my statement. How we think impacts how we feel. How we feel impacts how we respond. And how we respond is the way that we interact with others. And the power that lifts our daily life to understand that there's always a choice. I didn't throw a lot of quotes in my speech. I took the one of the many hundreds that I could take from a person that I have a high regard for, Viktor Frankl. It was a neurologist, and he's Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist. He was also a survivor of the concentration camps, and his whole family basically was taken from him. And his book on the meaning of life was one of the most impactful for me as I approach graduate school, and many years ago. But this one I loved. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are able to change ourselves. And if you could just put that little statement somewhere on a book, on a tablet, to remind yourself that whenever we're in a situation, when the situation can't change, we're able to change ourselves. And one of the ways that we can change ourselves is what we do as therapists here at JFS, in ways, whether it's through cognitive therapy, how our thoughts are being managed, how our moods are being managed. So there are ways that we make change. There are ways to work through. Grief and loss is one that I think is important. It's one that many of us heard. It's the emotional response to loss. Many of you, I'm sure, out there have heard of Dr. Kubler-Ross, who defined that grief cycle for us to look through related to the loss of a loved one. But these 5 stages, the first stage being denial. I used to always call it shock because I think the shock comes first, but denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And as you think back over your own 7 months, you may pick out some of these words and say, wow, that looks familiar. You know, that looks familiar. You know, many people are surprised at the word anger that is a part of this grief stage. And anger is simply a sense of self that feels assaulted in some way. My life has been turned upside down. It's actually can be a strong sense of self-esteem as long as it's managed in the right way. 2020 required a significant change in all of our lives, in different degrees and in different ways. But 2020 required significant change. And for me, the best way I'm processing what's happening with my clients, with myself, with my friends, is to look at these stages. Don't get stuck in any one of them. And we're going to talk about ways to get unstuck. Research is something I love, and I'm not going to belabor every line here, but I want to hit some high points. I was fascinated when we were talking about looking at the impact that COVID has had on isolation and loneliness. And I was interested to find that there's been some ongoing research out there in general about these 2 factors. In fact, there was a two-year research project that I found that folded into this March 2020 time. And it's interesting to share the peaks that came from that. But grief and loss, isolation and loneliness has been being looked at by family institutes, by the CDC, especially regarding COVID-19. The stages of grief that I think started in March and April, and we're kind of like, some of us not sure, it's not going to go away, and we start moving either into depression or bargaining. You know, we got stuck in depression. People in depression feel stuck. It's like stuck in maple syrup, can't get out of bed, don't get out of bed kind of thing. Other pieces that can come into the grief and loss are bargaining. Someone who's not going down the depression slide may start to bargain. Oh, I just take a chance. I'll go out and not wear a mask. I'll go out and go to work. I'll go do the things that I want. Bargaining in very dangerous ways to assuage their own feelings of insecurity and grief from that unknown factor. This one study told us that looking back, there was over a 2-year period that there had been an increase. This is 2 years prior to March, that had been a 15 to 16% increase overall in the impact of isolation and loneliness. So this has been going on. I don't want to try to define or extrapolate why I think that 2-year period showed that significant increase. That's probably for another time. But it reports that increases in feelings of lack of companionship, feeling left out, and being isolated averaged 15 to 16% overall. Interesting to me is so many of us who were used to, you know, getting up, going out to work and going into an office and having colleagueship, going to work, we're feeling that, you know, and over those last couple of years, things have changed for people, and that may be an indicator that brought up. A loneliness index, that's another index that was being looked at, reported that the least lonely people were the people who are married, those who are married with children, and the most lonely are those with single parents that don't have a support system. And that makes sense. That would not need a lot of research to convince me that a single mom, that all of a sudden the kids are not going out the door to school and she's trying to work from home if she has a job or if she's lost her job, would be reported as a high risk for depression. And the other thing I found really interesting, I hope you all might too, it was reported that those people who were separated or cohabitating or even just dating people had a decrease in loneliness. And perhaps we think that that was due to the fact that we become conscious. We're being mindful. We're kind of taking care of each other in a way that, you know, maybe I'll get around to calling Aunt Rosie, 2 weeks now. We become very conscious and very mindful about the connections. So I believe that has had a positive impact in that way. There is no doubt that we can't look at data and not look at the partnering challenge between the unstable economic conditions that have elevated loneliness and depression. One more I wanted to share with you. There's an American Life survey that reported at the height of the lockdown, and this is really the height of the lockdown, this first 2 weeks of March 16th and on, that 36% of all Americans reported feeling lonely or isolated. In that average number, 39% of those were females, 34% were males, those living alone. Here's more. I don't want to bore you, but I just think that this is really helpful for us to see that we had expectations about what was happening to certain, people in our lives, no matter what their ages were. But some of the actual reporting can have us pay attention to people maybe that we weren't thinking needed attention. 42% in this Abrams study said parents with children under 18 feel lonely or isolated a few times a week. I believe from working with parents myself that that's coming from the lack of connection to the older adults in their life, that they don't, they're afraid to bring grandmom to the house. So they're not getting to see, their grandchildren. And those parents are not getting the support. The kids are out of school and the parents are not getting the support. Parents generally struggle with feelings of depression. And in that study, it indicated 51% of moms are feeling depressed at least a few times a week, and 35% of the fathers. I'm not sure what would be the root cause of that, and won't try to guess, but half reported that having cried at least once. So, tears are a good thing. Tears are a release. They're actually one of those body gifts, that help us when we feel like we're about to blow. So they're actually a good thing. In intact families, in families where the parents were together, we found a report around isolation and loneliness disconnection of these figures. 30% male, 49% female. Again, these are starting to line up and be fairly close. Parents with younger children had higher rates of risks from depression, loneliness, 58%, while 45% of feelings of loneliness were experienced by parents with children aged 6 to 7. So even the age groups of the children that parents have mattered, and that the parents with children at home that were under 6 were perhaps the most stressed. There's, let me see, this 2-year study. Yeah, I threw this number in here because in a 2-year study, going back to what I said earlier, I was surprised that I found out so much information out there about the impact. I thought that this was onset totally by virus, but this 2-year study revealed that 33% who lived with others experienced loneliness, while 37% of those living alone. And so that was a comparison in that 2-year study. Not very different, right? It goes back to my first slide and my first statement that there's been an increase of 10 to 16%. Those people who were perhaps a bit depressed before all of this amped up those numbers as a possibility. This one I thought was, well, this one touched my heart. But according to the CDC study of adult mental health during the pandemic, 40% of respondents reported that at least one adverse mental or behavioral health condition had occurred. And the difference between that, mental meaning thoughts. I had dark thoughts, right? Or behaviors. I behaved in a way, irritated, frustrated, acted, not very friendly to my family members, those kind of things that were brought up. While May headlines, this is only 2 months in, but May was a month in when we thought the month of March going into April, and then it was going to end. So May, we were starting to continue down that slippery slope of when will this end? And the CDC reported an important thing, that many Americans haven't been seen or touched a person in 3 months. I happen to think that's one of the most important readings that I found. The power of a hug when you see a friend, you see a family member, the ability to give warmth to each other is huge. So out of all that loneliness comes stress, and stress, many of us know what it's like to feel stress, but that loneliness is stressful. It's a lack of physical contact that can cause us to be stressed, to sleep, wake up and go to sleep, wake up and go to sleep. Parents of young children are the loneliest. Makes me sad, when I read that. And I would love to see more research why. But additionally, the other thing to think about, if the marriage was in trouble, if the marriage was kind of struggling through some things, there were reports out from the family therapists reporting that it's now marriages are being held by a thread. I've had another married couple have it turn around, and because of the joint, worry for their children and COVID, they've actually cleaned up their marriage and set aside what seems like smaller worries now. So a lot depends on personality. The generation that interested me the most is the Zoomer generations, it's Generation Z. And this family report indicated that they are faring the worst, or they're reporting that they're faring the worst. 63% of those 18 to 24-year-olds reported feeling symptoms of anxiety or depression, while 2/3, that's almost 75%, one adverse mental or behavioral health problem. But that number is pretty high. I woke up and had one bad day. I had a bad day, would fold into a number like that. Or behavior, acting out or not doing what you're supposed to do. The one that worried me the most was when I read that 25.5% of this generation even considered harming themselves. So that study asks all of us to keep close eyes on those we love that are between 18 and 24, because they're least likely to let you see, that they're not doing well, and they have been reported to be a high risk. The expectation, having unmet expectations. If I was a high school senior and I'm excited about going to college, and all of a sudden I'm doing college in my parents' den. And if I was a senior coming out of college and I'm ready to get a job, and where can I find a job? So a lot of emotional downward slides due to lack of expectations being met. So we had worries about the older adults, because we knew right up front that I keep hitting the wrong buttons. I apologize. Okay, so loneliness causes stress. So how do we respond to stress? This is one of the most important things that comes up for me working with people who have anxiety, who have, trying to manage mood management. They feel blue, they feel sad. We're working with life levels, you know, but when it comes to allowing anxiety or depression to continue, we end up with something that can turn into depression that requires help. What we have in our bodies that I do a lot of study on, postgraduate studies up in Massachusetts on body-centered Gestalt, that's body intelligence that responds to stress by releasing hormones. And it's a gift to the body. And the body will allow you, when you are faced with conditions that create high levels of fear, for you to react to them. The body kicks in, pumps out cortisol, and gives you superhuman strength. You know, I'm saying all that because I pictured one time in a neighborhood a bunch of men picking a car up off a child who had been his bike ran under a truck. So I was stumbling there when I had that image. I had that image. And loneliness is not merely a feeling, it's a warning. Ineffective coping methods, they're like, I'm hearing it all the time, my friends. You're eating too much, they're sleeping too much, they're doing way too much media and television. Very, very, very hung up on the word that I hear every day from my clients, and then I never say it the rest of the life, the election. I'll just say it there and put it to bed. Decreasing loneliness. When you feel lonely, what you're doing now is the answer. Reaching out, participating. People are doing virtual hangouts. May not like the Zoom, but it's given us spaces. Get outside. People need exercise. Exercise will release those stress hormones. Right? Engage in self-care, whatever self-care is to you. Fun, movies, meditation, yoga, learn something new. And the one thing that's been working with a lot of my favorite people is that they make a list of people that they thought about and haven't called for a long time. And they're doing it. Each week we talk about it. So here we are in October. Understand the gift of your nervous system, that it's a warning system. Checking in with your breath. Your breath is the first indicator. Take a nice deep breath, if you will, with me right now. Take a nice deep breath and then exhale. And know that any time that you're feeling stuck or grief or in a place that's traumatic, you can interrupt that downward thought cycle by just simply breathing. The peace side of your nervous system is not automatic. It requires that we do something. So when we feel stressed and hyped up and nervous, we have to elicit and do something to take it back to the peace side of the nervous system. So prayer, meditation, those kinds of things. We all have this question, when will it end?
Mariann, Anonymous came in and they said, can you do that again, please? Your breathing technique.
Oh, sure. Sure. Thank you, because I need to breathe. Sure. I liked one of the best things you can do for self-care and any kind of tension is to breathe. So if you don't have any upper respiratory things going on this morning, simply take your left hand over your low belly, place your right hand over your heart, and quietly inhale through your nostrils, unless you have something going on, allergy, something. Inhale, nice deep elongated inhale. And if you will, hold that breath for 4, 3, 2, 1. Now exhale. And an easy way to do that is to pretend you're blowing out a candle. And you do that until you start to feel calm. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 8. Okay. Is that okay, Morgan?
Great, thank you. And we do have a question.
Yeah, we can stop here. I can flip through the rest. I think we only have a few more slides, but we can flip through them. Okay. Let's do some questions.
I just want to ask one question. We did have a few come in, but this one I think is really important to address now is what are the alternatives to hugs? Hugs are so important.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Hugs, bubbles, pods. What's the alternative?
You know, and you know when the CDC is telling you that's like a really missing link. The thing that comes to my mind is therapeutic touch. And I used to work in hospice, and there was a way without physically touching the person that if you kind of bring your arms around and not touch, that the energy of your body can be felt as loving energy, you know, coming the other way. If you want to think about it, they've told us to do elbow bumps, right? Instead of shaking hands. Well, you can hang out with an elbow bump a little bit longer, you know, and just because the idea of a hug is we're exchanging our energy, we're feeling loved, you know, we're human animals that require connection and we require love. And a hug is one of the best ways to do that. One of the things that we are taught to do in therapeutic setting is not to hug face to face as a professional person. We do side to side. You know, we do side to side because the idea of a hug, I think, that could cause any kind of exchange if someone's sick would be being face to face. So I think being side to side, you know, would work.
Thank you, Mariann.
Is that, I hope that helps. Do you want me to go again? Okay, I'm going to flip through here. I think we only have a few more so we can have some time to talk. But I really, really want to ground us in the idea that we have lots of things to think about. Cognitive therapy helps us think about things, how you think matters. You know, when my thoughts will turn into emotions, my emotions will turn into responses behaviorally. So really check in with your thoughts, you know, make sure. I ask people if your thoughts are dark, it's okay, own them. Name it, put it out there, and then give yourself 3 gratitudes, you know, to kind of offset. But this peace side of the nervous system is not automatic. If the Dr. Herbert Benson wrote the relaxation response, and he was a cardiac surgeon, and he studied, you know, the impact with his cardiac patients on, at that time back in the 70s, of transcendental meditation and the impact of that on the nervous system. And then we're moving into today's world of mindfulness-based stress reduction with John Kabat-Zinn, proving and working with cancer patients. So the idea of this nervous system, you know, we talked about TM back in the 70s, but there's lots more going on today for you, if you're not involved with, to get involved with. I'm very involved in yoga in my life, Tai Chi, Qigong, and prayer. But here's the thing. What Carlson found out was that we simply need to elicit a response for the peace side. The gift side, fight, flight, or freeze, that's automatic. That's going to come. You feel scared, that's going to happen. The trouble with the body system is it doesn't always know how to differentiate a slamming door, you know, from a threat to our life. It doesn't have that ability to differentiate. So it slams, our heart races, and we have to, through breath, the easiest thing to do is through deep and long breathing, bring ourselves back to the peace side. I call it the peace side of the nervous system because that's the side that any of us who have taken antidepressants, when we get depressed, the peace side has not been able to elicit the proper chemicals to keep our mood in balance. So it's almost like the serotonin reuptake is producing serotonin that should be coming out of your body. I know we're losing time here. Listen, this is just a list of recognizing depression. Know that if your daily life is switching and changing, loss of interest, can't get out of bed, trouble sleeping, feeling hopeless, reach out. Reach out to a friend, reach out to us, reach out to anyone. Don't stay stuck. Don't stay stuck. I put the national hotline down there. Here's some other ways of getting unstuck. Cognitive therapies. Cognitive therapies work. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is very popular, much much in use in JFS with many of our fantastic therapists that we have. These cognitive distortions that people are walking around, they share it with me. You know, this is never going to end. You know, telling ourselves, when will it be over? This is horrible. Those things impact the body. So we need to check in on thoughts. Learn mindfulness, practice a daily routine, play. Play, I have a book listed on a citation. We know that play, creative space that brings you joy is healthy. It's healthy mind, body, and spirit. Children know how to play. I love this story. One of my clients gave me permission to share it. She and her husband were feeling very down and depressed about not being able to see physically their grandchildren because the adult parents' fears of bringing COVID to the grandparents. And so what they do every night now, and I'm not sure if it's FaceTime or a Zoom, but the little grandchildren get on a Zoom and they call, and the grandfather shares bedtime stories. And I just love that. I think that was such a creative way on staying stuck in what we can't have, creating something that we can have. Learn the 5-second rule. Mel Robbins, she's somebody's a character on TV. She's written this book called The 5-Second Rule. If you're interested, look her up. She's fun. She has a daily Facebook badge. She's a lawyer that went through recovery issues for her own personal self, became a life coach. She gives me these things. I share these 7 with my clients. Most weeks, I ask them this. Name your feeling. What are you feeling in this moment? I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling sad. Put it out there. And once you put it out there, you need to move it. And when I say move it, you can move it in any way that feels good to you. You can move it with cranking on music like I like to do. You can sit down and draw. You can get outside and walk. But once you name that feeling, I feel frustrated. I feel stuck. I'm going to get unstuck because I'm going to do this. 5-second rule says, it's like I'm lying in bed and I feel like so down. I don't even feel like getting out of bed. 5-second rule, you would count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you take action. And she explains in her book how this worked. She was watching a rocket go off, and she had a countdown, and then it took off, and that gave her the idea that that's what she had to put in her life to motivate herself. It's kind of a fun thing. Do one thing today, the 29th. Do one thing today that makes you happy. This is really important. If you have to write it, and put it up in your house all over the place. This is temporary. We've been through things before. We've been through challenges. We've coped. We have the resilience. We have the formula for how to get through this. Just because this is new doesn't mean those of us who haven't shown coping skills that are effective, not unhealthy ones, because unfortunately, some people are resorting to unhealthy eating, unhealthy drinking. Dream big, dream big. Some of my clients say, I would just love to go to Australia, like that's dreaming big. And they have no idea that they could afford it, get there or not. The guided imagery tells us that when we think, create happy thoughts, we will feel better and we'll pull ourselves out of this place. I like this other fella, Brian Stewart. We all need to form healthy boundaries. Boundaries, I can't tell you how important a boundary is. Putting a boundary on a code for appropriate behavior, right? We all need to be kind to one another. It's too easy for the irritability of the current times to manifest themselves, and particularly onto people that we love the most, that we need the most in our life. Pay attention to your sleep. Pay attention to your nutrition. Exercise as best you can. Take a real picture on your financial world. My husband and I we're preparing. We have plan A, plan B, plan C. And so that's putting me and him in a proactive position. Sleep is everything. So many people sleep with a TV on in their room. Your brain doesn't get to go to sleep. You'll have nightmares. Try to have a quiet room. Try to turn down the noise and do something quiet 2 hours before sleep time. Healthy boundaries. I always say no is a complete sentence. Many of us that have a tough time not saying, I really don't want to do that, but no is a complete sentence. Stay grounded. Take the time and do what makes you feel grounded. If it's your spirituality, if it's attending synagogue, church through streaming, even though it's, feels odd today, do so. Live in this moment, because this moment is all we have. Being mindful, mindfulness-based stress reduction is the third wave of the action therapies that we participate in. And as a cognitive therapy, it keeps the bones of cognitive therapy and adds the mindfulness of staying in the moment, enjoying the moment, looking at what we have that's working good. Smile. And I realize now that when I wear a mask and I smile at people, because smiles always seem to work for me, working with people can't tell whether you're smiling or grinning. So put some words, it's a great day, put some words to it. Stretch and walk daily if you can. Again, I like to add my little peace practice here. I taught this to my grandchildren. Anytime they feel starting to get amped up or animated, they would sit down on a yoga mat in my house and we would do a little meditation. And I taught them just breathe in peace, inhale peace, and exhale tension. The quickest thing that you can do for yourself when you find yourself feeling tense is breathe. If you remember nothing else, know that this agency that I work with and our mission is to be a part of support in the community, and we want no one to feel alone. The strongest message I have for that is you are not alone.
Thank you so much, Mariann. We did have questions come in, but before you get out of your PowerPoint, could you go back to the Mel Robbins 5-second rule slide and leave that up on the screen for a bit?
I think I have her on my reference page too. Yeah, she's, it's funny. I do all this research and I love all the academics and I teach at college, but I get such a down-to-earth kick out of this lady. She's so honest. But she said it's really important. And, we do this in a therapy session. Name it. Name what you're feeling. Because as long as your feeling stays inside of you and you don't share it with somebody, it's going to work its way around. It's going to work its way around to your physical self, emotional self. Yeah, and I do it all the time. The days that are gray outside, I don't feel like getting out of bed. I have a paper to write or grades to make. I do this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But that you have to take action at the end of that. Because her belief is that you can't just think about stuff. Oh, that's a good idea and that's a great plan. You have to take action.
Thank you. Rachel asked, how can I offer emotional support to friends and family who have been quarantined, especially when I'm feeling isolated as well?
Oh my God, Rachel, we're twins. I've had the same feeling being a therapist, that it's the first time in 20 years that I'm going through the same thing as the folks that I'm seeing. So my best bet is to make sure that your self-care comes first, that you have a plan in place for your own self-care. Like right before I did this presentation, I took 15 minutes out and I did a little breathing exercise. Make sure that you're filled up, whatever self-care is to you, and then reach out. And the other thing about that is that each and every one of us is experiencing this uniquely. If there's any way that she can do a group, can even pull everybody together in a group on Zoom. The book clubs that I'm in now are on Zoom, and I didn't want to do it at first, but that's the best we can do. The favorite question I have in life is, how can I help? How can I help? And whose needs need to be served? So when we're thinking about the family and friends and who needs that kind of help, it's important that it's like, what do they say on the airline? when they're giving you the safety stuff at the beginning, if you're traveling with a child, you know, and the oxygen mask drop down, make sure you put that mask on you first before you can take care of others.
Anonymous said, as for loneliness and feeling stuck, sometimes I reach out to people, but if I don't connect or hear back, it makes me feel more depressed. It also more loneliness when I reach out and I feel like nobody reaches out to me. Can you address this for me?
Yeah, number one, I want to say I'm sorry that that's happening. And if you were in a therapy room with me, I would be drawing a circle on a piece of paper and saying, let's put different people in your circle and let's put some resources, even if it begins with me, you know, because I would wonder what would keep Anonymous from being able to then send another message in a different way, either through an email or something. And, you know, we can first make an assumption that somebody might not have gotten, you know, the message. We can change our thinking to say, wow, maybe my friend is in worse condition than I am and just doesn't have it inside him. So how could I help him? I have some needs myself. So checking in with how we think about it is what I would suggest.
How do we change the thoughts of it's never going to end? I find myself getting stuck there.
Yeah. Oh, it's so perfect. It's so perfect. And it's, you know, and I say this, it will end. There has never been an event, big, small. My mother even said this about a house. You know, a house can sit on the market for 6 months or a year or 6 days, but it's going to sell. And I always keep that metaphor in my mind that this will end. We just don't know the way it's going to end. And that's what's creating anxiety. So we have to turn that into an empowerment type of position where we say, what choices do I have? That image of the mosaic, what choices do I have for how it's going to end? It's going to end for me because I'm going to make certain choices about where I go. I'm going to make certain choices to keep my health up, my eating up, but it will end. And just every day to yourself, you know, just write it down. This will end. And when it ends, dream big. When it ends, I want to do something really, really fun. Like think about a gift, a place, a person that you would go so that you could have excitement about looking forward. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I want to do. You make me want to go back to Ireland.
How can we check our thoughts? Can you give us an example?
Yeah. You have to get quiet. First, you have to sit down in a quiet place and become very, very still. Close your eyes. And then the way I do it is with a little breathing technique. You can do it's even a body scan of breathing in and breathing out and just traveling the whole body in and out. And then traveling the whole body and noticing what's going on. You know, what's going on in my body today? Do I have some neck pain? Am I holding tension in my neck? You know, am I feeling really, really sad? You know, what kind of words come up? Just allow your thoughts to put them out on a blue screen, like it's a beautiful blue sky in front of you. Put the thoughts on those clouds, you know, take them out. It's like art. The beauty of art is that we can look at it from the outside. So take what's inside and put it out in some way, whether it's to write it down, to do a little scan, to express it, get some art paper out. I have a lot of artists that get those feelings out and then put them in a different way. Music, art, drawing, all of those things. But name it. The first thing you have to do is name it. You know, don't stuff it. Don't stuff it. If you're angry, you're angry. You know, if you're scared, you're scared. You know, and find somebody safe to say those things to.
Anonymous said, overall, how can I become more resilient during this time?
I think it's fascinating because you already are becoming more resilient because you're participating in education that's going to give you a wider, you know, scope of tools. You know, so I believe what you're doing is what I would want you to continue to do. Now, don't do it alone. You know, the biggest thing is in this pandemic, we talked about isolation and loneliness, and you were not alone. we need to find ways to reach out. We need to have support groups, you know, to support. I'm sure, I don't have insider information, but I'm sure there are going to be things coming out of this workshop and this 3 days that are going to give our Jewish Community Center and our Jewish Family Services ways for us to come together and say how we can better serve, continue to serve, not better because we do serve, but what's out there that's needed. Just the response today says, wow, I'm ready to put my hand up and offer a support group, you know, because I think it's connection to others. You know, in support groups, people start to give tips to one another, you know, well, this is working for me. And then this is what I've done. And, you know, I do have another group that I work with, a grief group, and they're starting to make social plans, right? So reaching out, you can't do it alone. Can't do it alone. So I think those are the kind of things. Resilience comes from building healthy coping skills.
Anonymous said, like the previous question, I'm especially sensitive to whether or not someone responds by calling or texting back, and that their comments are warm and friendly. Sometimes I crave proof that my friendship is reciprocal, and comforting, loving remarks are so meaningful. Anonymous tries to do that for her friend, his or her friends too.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have Anonymous said, because I live alone, I especially need to be recognized and accepted since there's no one at home to make me feel appreciated.
Oh, wow. Well, you know, again, I would start with the fact to be able to appreciate herself, you know, to check in with yourself, you know, that you yourself are a whole person and a gift to others, to identify, you know, who those people are that you're a gift to reach out to friends. And if you need to make new friends and new connections, to do that. I think that's something that would be really worthwhile for you to take a look at. My question would be, have you been this sensitive prior to these 7 months, or is it just come on in the 7 months? Because it's just been something that's been going on for a while. I would say it would be worth exploring, and I would say it'd be worth exploring in some kind of capacity, whether it's counseling or reaching out, you know, but making a connection.
Anonymous asked, how can I find a support group?
I'll make a pitch to my CEO. I'll make a pitch. But let me say this about CEOs. Not CEOs. I'm going to talk about my CEO. I'm going to talk about the support groups. There's a ton. If you go on Google, my favorite thing, right? If you Googled, there's probably a lot of, you know, opportunity. Typically with support groups, though, they're usually around things like, you know, there's NAMI for people who have major depression. They run support groups. There's AA groups and NA groups for people who, you know, are struggling with addiction or recovering from addiction. There's Al-Anon groups. There's usually all kinds of groups that are specific. So this is a really interesting one. What would Anonymous name this support group? If they would give me a name of what they would call that support group. You know, because, you know, you might find it in the NAMI offerings, because that's strictly a focus on mental illness.
Yeah, and I just want to add, if you visit our website at jfsdelaware.org, you can find our support and therapeutic groups online as well. And you can also give us a call at 302-478-9411. Talk to our intake specialist to find out what services we have. Mariann, we did get a question, is how can you explain how to reach out for help with JFS? How do I know when it's the right time to reach out?
If you're thinking about it, the best thing to do, we have tremendous intake department, young lady that's our intake person. You can call and talk to our intake person, and they might be able to help facilitate you thinking through what would be a good thing for me to do right now. There's no harm in exploring and reaching out. I would say that would be what I would want to do. If you feel alone And if you do not feel that you have a circle of supportive educational opportunities or supportive friends around you, or if you feel like the support is coming from family, and sometimes family, we love each other, we can't necessarily have the skills that you can get from a neutral party to help us through this. So I would just say reach out. I would say reach out. I think there are some informal places. Cont'd Delaware is one that has a telephone, a general number to call in. But there's a lot to call in, but you can start with us.
A great question just came in. What if I don't find a therapist at JFS that meets my needs?
Absolutely. That's such a great question, because one of the most important parts of the success, and I've even seen the ratio of 85% of the healing comes in the therapeutic relationship between the person and the therapist. So who the therapist is really matters. We do our very, very best job on intake of identifying the therapist that might best fit your need. It's not just, it's not like random, it's not like going out to a restaurant and who gets the next table. We really take it very seriously. Someone has called in, they've stated this is what their needs are, that they would like to have met. And then we identify a therapist who would be able to meet that need. I have had, several of us have had a client, it didn't match or it didn't work with us, and there's somebody else in the field. We're professionals. You're not going to hurt our feelings. If you say, yeah, I really want to do this work, but this just doesn't seem to be working for me, can I see somebody else? All of us have had that experience, and it's not a problem.
And we have another question, and we're getting low on time here. How do you handle Zoom with friends where all have family in the area, see them a lot and talk about it? My family's far away and I can't see them. I often get off Zoom feeling worse.
I would say proclaim it. I would share that with the group. You all need to help me. I'm missing my family, and I see, it's kind of dialectical. It's like she can enjoy seeing her friends and their kids, and also be able to let them know, it makes me feel really, really lonely, and I would wonder, does her family that's extended have the same capacity to join her on a FaceTime or a Zoom, or that she could bring that up to? My granddaughter's over in Germany right now at the military, and she asked for a Sunday afternoon, and she wants everybody in it, and yeah, so I would ask them, I would ask your friends, I would want to know, I don't know whether she's worried she's going to bring them down, but she won't. Just what this tips from Mel, name it, just name the feeling. I love being here in these Zoom groups, and I really struggle because it often makes me miss my family too. And you may get some of the support that you need by just expressing it.
Thank you so much, Mariann, and thank you all for joining. Please come back and join us for other sessions, and feel free to contact us with any feedback or to get further information or answers to the questions that we were not able to answer today on our landing page, siegeljcc.org/wellness. Please join us later at 5 p.m. for Quarantine, a conversation with Samaya Salters and Susan Nakawisa from Jewish Family Services. This session is only for teens and requires pre-registration and a separate Zoom link. At 6 p.m., join Kathleen Perkins from Siegel JCC for Pilates. And at 7 p.m., join us for our Wellness Summit wrap-up and Resilience keynote with Dr. Mariann Wolskee from Nemours. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.